Now, everybody knows that there are several political systems in the world, but it is commonly accepted that democracy is the best out of available. So, for us also, it is extremely important that our democratic process continues without interference. But sadly, what is happening today is that the president of this country is challenging the democratic process. Now, in a democratic system, holding elections is of utmost importance, because that's the only opportunity the general public gets to go and express their point of view. Tell the government where they stand, what they believe in. So elections must be held on time. That is why in all countries where democracy system is functioning properly, elections are held on the due date. But in Sri Lanka, the president of the country is trying to change the dates. He's trying to postpone, he's trying to cancel. He comes to the parliament and makes speeches and says, there's no need for election, there are no elections declared, there's no money for elections. Even a small child knows that the election has been declared. The president's own party, UMP, has submitted nominations. So if there's no election, why would the UMP submit nominations for certain councils? So the only person who doesn't seem to know that there's an election in progress is the president. Now he comes up with this argument that there's no money to be allocated for the election. Now how false is this statement? And he categorically says, I'm not going to release money. Who is he to say that he's not going to release money? He's just the finance minister. Of course, president and the finance minister. The finance minister cannot decide where and how the money should be spent. That is to be decided by the parliament. According to our system, according to our constitution, Article 148 clearly says the government's finances are decided by the parliament. So every year there's a budget that's been approved by the parliament. Of course, the budget is presented to the parliament by the finance minister. It is debated, changed, and finally once approved only, the finance minister can go and allocate money. So here, there's a budget allocated. 2023 budget clearly allocates 10.9 billion rupees for the election commission, which is 10 billion more than the usual allocation of 2021 and 2022. So that 10 billion has been allocated for the local government election, which is due this year. So if it is allocated in the budget, how can the president say that there is no money? The president is trying to present to the country false argument that you can spend money only if you earn money. That is false, because the government, when it prepared its budget, had a 2,404 billion budget deficit. So obviously that budget deficit was to be bridged through loans. The government has to raise money, borrow money to cover the expenses of 5,819 billion estimated expenditure. So if the government has to borrow to find money for the election, that is nothing unusual. But you have to anyway borrow 2,404 billion to meet this year's expenditure requirements. So obviously the president is trying to fool the people, and the public of this country are not fools. Public understands. This is completely a misguided statement that's been made by the president, that there's no money for the election. Raising 10 billion rupees is not a difficult thing. Government can go and borrow that money from any local bank. Look at the treasury bills issuance in February alone. 133 billion government has borrowed in February alone. So 10 billion is not a big issue. And furthermore, the most important thing is election commission doesn't want 10 billion. They have written to the speaker saying they need only 4.4 billion, out of which also they are asking for only 1.1 billion immediately. That's the immediate requirement. The rest they say they can settle later, because that has been the practice all throughout. Whenever an election is held, government never went and paid all the money at once, upfront. The monies to the government institutes are paid later. So what is 1.1 billion? That is 2 hours expenditure of the government. The government has estimated 5,819 billion for this year's expenditure. That means 16 billion per day. So 1.1 billion is just about 2 hours of expenditure. So if you say that you don't have that money, then the president might as well go home. The government must go home. If they can't manage such a simple expenses, that is not the case here. It is the case of not having any respect for the democracy. So we must somehow or other fight against this and prevent this, because we have to prevent democracy for this country.